Started. Thank you, everyone who's joined us. My name is Kim Lee. I am the founder and CEO of Forge. We're here today with Josh Andrews of Gatehouse Law, and I will let him introduce himself in just a minute and tell you what he does, and then we will get to the topic that everyone really wants to hear about today. So I just want to thank y'all for joining us. I will say, first of all, this is the first time that I have actually hosted a webinar and done Facebook Live. So thank y'all for your patience. We are really excited to be able to do this so quickly. We understand firsthand that the fear and the struggle is real right now for small business owners. And so normally at Forge, we have lunch and learns. And so we really wanted to be able to take this platform and this time to continue that education for business owners right now, especially when things are so crazy. So one of the things that I will ask y'all, we are going to continue these lunch and learns, and we want to make them topic appropriate of what y'all want to hear. So be sure to use the chat box. You can introduce yourself to people who are in this webinar, but let us know topics that you would like to see addressed. We have a list of topics that we are trying to build and we're trying to set up for webinars, but please let us know. We want your feedback. We want to know the things that you're thinking about, how it's going to affect what you do, nobody knows what it's going to look like in the future, but just maybe things that you really would like to see addressed by multiple people, and we will do our best to reach those topics. So we want to be a resource for business owners. We want to do whatever we can to help you out during this time, because we know firsthand that everything is different now. So without going on anymore, I'm going to turn my camera off, but before we start, there is an area where you can ask questions. So just if you click on the Q&A button, you can ask questions, and at the end, Josh is going to have plenty of time for question and answers, or if you want to put something in the chat, I'll be monitoring these. But I'm going to turn my video off and let Josh take it away.
Well, hi, everybody. Like Kim said, my name is Josh Andrews. I am the founding member of Gatehouse Law. We're a boutique law firm that focuses on providing comprehensive legal representation for small and closely held businesses that is accessible, predictable, and approachable. Comprehensive legal starts with an understanding of what you need to protect your business where you are, and a crisis, a time like this, is no different. Our mission is to lower the barrier to working with legal by offering an education-first approach to legal services and advice. Our goal has always been to tell you why in an it depends world. Right now, with all of the unrest and confusion facing us concerning COVID-19, we're here to provide guidance to help you protect your business and make informed decisions as you work to respond in these uncertain times. As this is an unprecedented event, we can provide guidances and best practices and work to continue to provide legal updates on how these items are impacting your business as our information changes. But as I'm sure all of you have experienced, our information is changing constantly. As a result, and I'll let you guys know now, and then I'll remind you again at the end, we're actually doing Gatehouse Live on our Instagram page, we're at Gatehouse Law on Instagram every day at 1:30. That's every weekday at 1:30. So we'll be going live at 1:30 this afternoon after this, in case you think of any questions after we're done and want to jump on there and ask them as well. But developing legal protections in an unprecedented time is about communication and clarity. To ensure that you are doing everything in your power to protect your business, we want to provide some information to help you navigate this time and understand what's going on. So in this webinar, we're going to look at the impacts the coronavirus is having on your business relationships. We use what's called the 3 pillars of a firm foundation. As Kim said, they actually do a lot of lunch and learns at Forge. We've done a number of those lunch and learns, and one of the ones that we did was talking about these 3 pillars of a firm foundation and how business relationships can be categorized in certain places from a business standpoint to help you develop strong legal protections. And that's what we're going to go through today, and how we navigate this crisis, understanding what's going on in each of these different business relationships. Because as we communicate the decisions that we're making, we have to be looking at everyone we need to be communicating to and how we need to do that and what considerations we need to have during that time. Like I said, the key to dealing in a situation like this is communication. We're aiming to communicate to alleviate the fears of the individuals we're dealing with in our business. Remember, as business owners, as business leaders, people are looking to us. Our staff is looking to us. Our partners, in some instances, are looking to us. Our customers are looking to us, not only for how we're responding in our business, but how we're dealing with this from a more macro sense, right? How we as business owners are dealing with this particular situation to move things forward. People are looking to us because we are leaders in our different places, our different spheres of influence. And sometimes we may not have all of the answers, but communicating in this time is essential. So we're going to get into where those places are and how we can kind of communicate. But as we progress through this, one of the big things that I want to make sure everyone understands on the business side as a business owner is that everything is negotiable, especially in a situation like this. We all have contracts, we all have obligations, we have expenses that we're having to pay, and a number of other things that are going on, but we're also running into situations where we are not able to comply with either our obligations or other things. We'll talk about some of those and the decisions the government's making that are impacting those and how we kind of move forward. But understand that there's no precedent here. So the best thing we can do is the next right thing. We can just put one foot in front of the other and continue to move forward and iterate as it becomes necessary. But understand that it's all negotiable. We're all trying to figure out the best possible way forward on both sides of every contract issue we're dealing with. The worst thing you can do right now is not to communicate with your landlord or your bank or your vendors or your contractors or your staff or your customers. The worst thing you can do is to not communicate. Communication is absolutely key. I'm going to reiterate something I talked about in our first Gatehouse Live last Thursday about as we're making decisions as business leaders, how can we kind of process some of these different decisions that we're doing to figure out how to move our business forward? And as we develop our plans, as we think through these, even when we're making iterations on our plans because, you know, something changed for us, right? We're trying to figure out that next best thing, but we can break down the plans in this way. So business as usual is no longer what's really happening, right? We're making some changes. Even in my service firm, we're making changes. Typically, a lunch and learn like this, I would be at Forge and we would be talking, and we would have provided you lunch from one of the local restaurants who would have been serving lunch today, so that everyone could be a part of this. But that's not what's happening. So business as usual is starting to change, but what are the small incremental things that we can do to continue our business moving forward? Moving our staff home, but maintaining our normal operational meetings, just putting them on video, making sure that everyone on our staff understands that they're going to be on video and they need to be ready for work and they need to be available during certain hours. These small changes that can be made. As a result of those, what are the small unnecessary expenses that aren't happening right now that we need to make sure that we can cut so that we can solve some of these problems? Because our business is changing and there are small changes we can make to maintain our goals of, one, making sure that we weather the storm, and two, making sure that our people are still with us on the other side of the storm. The next thing that we want to consider is, are there any conservative rollbacks on things that you were planning to do, say, in Q2 of this year? Can we start to kind of pull some of those things back? Were you going to deploy some cash in Q2 for a certain thing that was going to happen, but now you can reallocate the way that that cash looks like? You know, whether that's to continue to pay your people, to change the nature of what their job looks like, or something like that, so that we can, again, focus on our people and weathering the storm. And then the last one is, what radical moves do we need to necessarily make to protect our company? What are the big things we need to do right now to keep our company moving forward? We say this all the time in our education things, but if you have a mission that you set out because you truly believed that your company, what you were doing, was going to change the world and was going to make an impact on the world, the most important thing we can do right now is to ensure that our company weathers the storm, right? That we are still on the other side to take care of our customers, to provide for our team, to provide for our families as we're kind of moving through these operations. So as we as we start to break some of these things down, we're going to go through what we call the 3 pillars of a firm foundation. Those 3 pillars are your foundational relationships. That is how the owners relate to each other and the business, how the business relates to the government, taxation wise and licensing wise, insurance relationships. Then we're going to talk about your internal relationships. That is everything necessary to get your product or service to the market, and how do we actually solve some of those relationships, and what do they look like. And then we're going to talk about your external relationships, which is how the outside world relates to your company, right? That is typically what we view as our sales funnel. That's everyone from a casual visitor to our store or online to our biggest raving fan and repeat customers. What do those relationships look like? As lawyers, so often we're viewed as the people who draft contracts, and we're big and nasty or whatever. But the reality is what we do is help what you do, which is relationships and changing the world and developing relationships. We help protect those and define those and make sure that they're clear. So in a situation like this, what we're looking at is the things we never thought were going to happen in these relationships, right? This is why we have contracts, to clarify some of these things. In some instances, we have contracts. What we're discovering right now in this particular situation, because we haven't seen one of these in our lifetime, the contracts typically aren't dealing with stuff like this. We're going to talk about force majeure and what those things look like, and we're going to talk about performance and how that matters, because there's a lot of even contract language that's not helping us out right now, because we're in a situation that the contract doesn't cover, and we need to understand how to deal with these situations. So as we get started, we're going to talk about these foundational relationships, because this is how you, the owner, or you partners work together with everything that's necessary to make your business exist as something separate and apart from you as an owner. So one of the first things we're going to talk about is how do we talk to your partners, right? During a time of crisis like this, we have to start with our partners, because as a business, we're making decisions that we didn't think we were going to be making. All of us, when we were planning 2020 for this year and figuring out the big, amazing things we were going to do in our business, we did not consider the world shutting down at the end of Q1. And not knowing what Q2 was going to look like. So this is an unprecedented time together for us to sit down with our partners. But on top of the business issues that we have right now as partners, we have different personal lives and personal situations that we're dealing with our partners, right? Because I actually don't have any partners to talk to anymore, but I have a lot of kids, and my mother-in-law is with me, who is one of those who high-risk individuals that we're concerned about. I have an asthmatic kid. I myself am asthmatic. There are decisions that I have to make to protect my family that are not necessarily associated with business because of this particular situation. We also, when we're dealing with partners, we may be dealing with income issues, right? Because we're trying to pay our staff and pay our bills, and we're looking at cuts in our revenue and other impacts. So how are we going to deal with those particular economic impacts of what's actually going on in the business as partners, right? Because ultimately, as equity stakeholders, we're the first ones that are getting cut, right? If we can't solve the problem, we're going to have to make those decisions. So as partners, how are we dealing with that, right? Even if you worked with an attorney and you have your partnership agreement set up and it's all set up a certain way, now is a different time. It's a time to have a conversation, because the worst thing you can do is not lay out the expectations you have with your partners and understand, how are we working together? What are we doing to resolve this? How are we making changes in our business to make sure that we're still afloat, right? How are we making decisions to take care of our staff? What is the most important thing that we're trying to accomplish as business leaders? If you have partners, those decisions need to be made, and they need to be made quickly. Online meetings, and this is one of the places where I'll say the phone is not solving the problem right now. Being able to see each other's face is a big deal. And online has got some wonderful things, but it is a very important thing that we need to be talking about, is how we're adjusting partner pay, how we're adjusting work schedules, what are we expecting from the partners, right? Because we're all also dealing with personal sides of this, right? So our entire world has changed. You know, do you have one of the partners that has a bunch of kids they're dealing with right now? Does one of your partners a single parent who's also dealing with, you know, kids who are at home that we're trying to make sure and deal with all of this education stuff and impact? You know, do we have partners who are actually dealing with loved ones who have been diagnosed, or anything like that? How are we solving these problems? So you need to begin having those conversations. You know, we need to be calm in a crisis and help our team know what we're doing to move forward. And as partners, we need to present a unified front to kind of move forward. And then we want to also sit down with our partners. When you came together to start your business, you came together with your partner with an idea and a way to do something and change your industry, change your community, whatever that happens to be. Now is the time to start talking about what iterations may be possible to keep the business moving forward and afloat. And so these partner meetings are really important. Don't let the fact that we're now working from home and not necessarily seeing each other every day create that distance, because on the business side, this is absolutely essential. It's how, as business owners, we're taking care of our families, right? Because though there are some things that exist in these bills for us, there's also, or these stimulus bills, that is, for us, there are also impacts to us, because if we're paying people on sick leave in an FMLA situation that we didn't used to have to, and we're trying to pay people to do a job that they weren't doing, you know, 2 weeks ago, you know, how are we trying to solve that problem, and what does that look like for us? Now is the time for us as partners to figure that out. The next conversation is your investors, those people who are not involved in the day-to-day, but whose money is tied up in your business. They have a lot of questions, right? They do understand that you're trying to solve problems and figure stuff out, but we can't forget to communicate with our investors. You know, even if it's just debt holders, right? You know, if we've got private investors, people who've put money in us, no matter what our contractual relationship with them is from a debt or equity standpoint, those people are different than our partners, right? They're not the ones we're talking to day in and day out, but they have their concerns and they need to know how we're making decisions. Also, if they had the money to invest in your business, chances are they probably may also have some insights and some options to kind of solve some of these problems. So let's not be afraid to lean on that advice that may exist, because obviously they're in it with you. They want to make sure that you weather the storm, because they've got risk in this. So don't be afraid to reach out to them and make sure we understand what's going on. They want to know how we're mitigating our risk, how we're making sure we're taking care of our people, how we're making sure the business moves forward and we're able to meet our obligations. And they may have some ideas or some thoughts. So don't be afraid to reach out to them and answer some of those. The next is the state and federal government, right? We tend to kind of gloss over this because this is about tax elections and business licensing, and those are things that matter. But you know, typically those are things that we know that we've got to do, and we've got to look at them and pay attention. But right now, what we're talking about is our federal, our state, and our local, whether that's county or city government, and what they're actually doing to help us and what we can do to help them, right? So one of the things that you're looking at is if there are surveys, I think it's Birmingham Strong or Beham Strong, is right now there's actually an economic impact survey that they're asking business owners to take, right, and tell the city of Birmingham what's going on and how are we being impacted, because they can only help as they're getting information, right? Or your senators or Congress people asking for, you know, for updates and for input. You know, are there different groups that are taking input so that they can advocate on your behalf, right? What opportunities and town halls exist right now? There are a couple that I did see over the weekend. One for restaurants is there's a saverestaurants.co. If you were in the restaurant business and you're dealing with that, saverestaurants.co is starting to advocate on behalf of restaurants all over to try to figure things out, because all kinds of restaurants are being impacted, right, in this particular situation. And those are the ones, and the workers who make money on, you know, working in restaurants are going to be impacted largely from this. And right now, the stimulus bill isn't solving that problem necessarily, because there's a lot of different things that impact that particular industry, and that saverestaurants.co is working together. I believe the James Beard Foundation is associated. So take a look at that if you're a restaurant. Look, if we're not even restaurants, how can we help, right? The next is for retailers because they're starting to feel it, right? Even Jefferson County is starting to, a lot of retailers are non-essential and they're now being told to close and they're not able to be open. There's a National Retailer Foundation. It's nrf.com, I believe. They are working on your behalf as well, and they're lobbying. So see if there's any information that's available there. I'll also say I'm going to apologize right now. I meant to do this at the top for not having slides to provide some of these things to you, but we've been so focused on researching and updating our research daily and hourly in some instances to make sure we're giving you the most up-to-date information that the slides kind of fell by the wayside. So I do apologize for that. The next is the SBA. We in the state of Alabama have now been listed in this disaster relief program, and there's some loans and lending assistance that's coming available, and we can make sure that we get moving forward on those things. A couple of things I'm going to say about that one. Is one, let's be having conversations with our bankers, right? Because a lot of times they work with the SBA. They know what's going on to kind of figure these things out, to figure out if it makes sense for you to proceed forward. Next, the disaster relief program is designed for those who've been directly impacted by the downturn. We can all technically claim that we've been impacted in some way by this particular economic downturn. However, there's only so much money to go around and time is of the essence, so we don't want to bog the system down with a Hail Mary for us, right? We need to be looking for the thing that's most important. And as business owners, we need to be spending our time digging into the things that will actually move our business forward, not using a shotgun approach of just, if it's available, we're going to try and let them kick us out. Because the government, the SBA, those who are managing these particular things are also limited in their capacity and their ability to do these things. So we want to make sure that we don't overload the system so no one gets the help as fast as they need. So we want to go ahead and start kind of pre-vetting ourselves and figuring out whether or not it makes sense. So you do want to make sure that you're not wasting the time of those who are doing it if you don't qualify, right, as a Hail Mary. Now, sometimes it does make sense for your business because it may be the only option, and there's an argument to be made there because directly impacted is such a innocuous way of kind of saying who qualifies, right? But it is something to take into effect. The next is going to be your insurance, right? What does your insurance look like? And right now is the time to pull out those things that we may or may not have actually paid a ton of attention to when we got started and figuring out what loss of business income insurance looks like and what it actually covers and what we're covered here. Typically, a lot of insurance policies have a few things going on. One is business income, loss of business income. The other is civil authority orders, loss of business income as related to something the government has said. Now, with a lot of those, it's actually based on a physical loss, like you are unable to be open because there was a fire. That's typically the design of these particular insurance policies. And as we move forward, and if we're able to get any information, we will spread it as quickly as possible. But the thing that I will say here is this is going to be dependent on your insurance policy and what you are actually insured for and what that looks like. So a couple of things I would recommend. One, I would work with a lawyer. We read these things all the time and we can help you determine if it's worth it to kind of dig into it and look at it. The next is talk to your insurance agent. Don't necessarily call the claims line right now. Reach out to your agent. Understand they may be busy because there's a lot of other people talking to them, but your agent works for you. Your agent is there to help you understand how this process works and make sure it makes sense so they can assist you through this process. And they may already have a heads up or kind of know what's going on and know whether or not you're chasing a rabbit trail that's not going to help you in your business. Because ultimately we don't want to waste time doing this for us as business owners. They're also receiving direct information from the insurance company, and they may be able to help you navigate the process right now. Also, agents have no dog in the fight, right? They're focused on you. Adjusters, the insurance company, the claims department, they're battling the largest set of claims that they've seen in a very long time. They're having to go through huge lists of claims that are made and figure out whether or not they're real or they're legitimate and make decisions rapidly. And so they're not in it to answer your questions right now. They're just dealing with it the best that they can, most of them probably from home. And so they're trying to figure a lot of those things out for you. So reaching out to your agent, having that conversation may go a long way for you. So on the foundation side, that's foundation's about what keeps your business moving forward. We want to make sure that you as a business owner are actually able to, move your business forward and understand in conversation with your partners, with your insurance company, with the government who's working with you, with your investors. How are you making sure that you're communicating with all of those particular groups of people? The internal side of the protections are about all of the relationships that you have in your business that are necessary to get your product or service to market. Right now, I'll be honest, typically when we have this conversation and we're talking about getting your business started, our conversation is there are some natural protections that exist in these relationships, right? Your employees, those who work with you, they want to see us succeed because they recognize that their families also depend on our business. And so a lot of times when we're looking at developing those policies and developing those procedures as small businesses, we say, hey, we know that these guys are working with us and they're here to take care of us. And we're looking at a lot of all the other legal protections. But now, as business owners, this has become our focus, right? As our people. How do we take care of our people, these internal relationships? How do we make sure that we're taking care of those? So the first relationship I'm going to talk about, or the first two on the internal side, are basically the things that we're asking for so that we can take care of the second two, which is the actual team that works with us. So number one, our banks, right? If we're dealing with carrying debt, if we've got our lines of credit, we've got other issues like that, we're drawing down on those to make sure we can take care of our people and looking in this downturn of cash and what that looks like. How do we talk to banks to help us resolve certain problems, to solve a lot of these things? And what are the questions that we need to be asking for, right? Because again, banks are being hit with a lot of questions, right? Here's what I have to say. One, if you are working with a banker, if you have a direct relationship with a banker, that's the contact that you need to be going to, because they want to help you, because you are their customer. Their job depends on you, and you need to understand that. They are trying to help you solve this problem, because if you go belly up and you're unable to pay things, it actually impacts them. So you want to reach out to make sure that they're there. So here's a couple of things that we may want to be asking for. Are there any deferrals or payment relief that we can actually get? Most of your terms, most of your promissory notes on repayment of things are not going to cover this, right? Sorry. So what you are looking for is you are going to be looking for, are there options available? One, is the bank actively doing something for all of their customers? And two, is there something you can ask for? Again, everything's negotiable. Hey, I've been a customer for 25 years and I've never missed a payment, and you're making a lot of money off of me. Can you defer my payments for the next 4 months so that I can figure out what's going on? Can you get an additional loan, right? The SBA is there, but the banks are the ones that may be helping you. They may be able to get a loan underwritten by the SBA, but they may be able to assist you in certain ways. Is there forbearance options that you can have? Can you get certain fees waived, right? So say you are making your payments, but it was a day late, right? But you got it in because your clients finally paid you. Can you get some of those fees waived? And then extensions and temporary increases of lines of credit to kind of keep your business moving forward. Is the bank willing to work with you, a good customer who's been around for a long time, to extend lines of credit? That may actually short circuit some of your time process, right? Now, it's a little bit different because if it's not necessarily included in the stimulus package, the repayment process may look a little bit different, but it is an avenue to explore, especially if speed is the issue that you're necessarily dealing with. So a few things to talk about as you approach the bank. One, like I said, if you have a banker, talk to them. They know you, they know your business, they know what kind of customer you've been, and they can advocate on your behalf to the people who are making decisions at the bank. If you do not have a banker, now may actually be the time to be reaching out to them. they've received some cash and some ability to kind of keep the economy moving forward, and they are trying to solve problems as well. But right now, if you are not receiving the assistance you need from your bank, now may be the time to start shopping, because you may have some available options that exist, and everybody's trying really hard to keep or gain new customers in that particular industry. So start making those decisions. If you were working with a big bank, if you were in a situation you're working with, say, a Wells Fargo or a BBVA or somebody like that, where you don't have necessarily a direct contact or someone who has the ability to make decisions, find someone who does, right? Remember, I don't know or I can't help you isn't necessarily the answer that you're looking for. Keep moving up the chain, right? If somebody says, I'm going to get back to you, make sure they get back to you. Figure out what day they're getting back to you, what hour they're getting back to you. And if they haven't, follow up with them. You have to, in a situation like this, be the squeaky wheel, right? Squeaky wheel gets the grease. And that's what we have to pay attention to. And we have to make sure that we're being taken care of. This is one of those places where I keep saying everybody's dealing with this, right? But at the same time, there are people who have the ability to help us and the ability to solve some problems. And we want to make sure that we're reaching out to those people and getting those problems solved for us, right? Because we're the small business, they're the bank that's got the extra cash that we need. And we're just trying to figure out a way to keep moving things forward. The next of the relationships is a landlord, right? You may have a fantastic relationship with your landlord, but your lease is probably the biggest obligation you have. And one of the issues that you're going to be battling right now is the contractual obligations that exist in your lease, right? There are a couple of things that you need to make sure that you understand and know to look for as you proceed in this time. Again, as I will say, this is about getting information out, but we lawyers do read leases all the time. We know what to look for. We've seen a lot of them. Right now, we're answering a lot of questions about them because of the things that we're about to talk about. So if you are unsure, if you're trying to figure out how to navigate this process, or if your landlord's not willing to talk or work with you, this is the time to necessarily involve a lawyer to figure out what your obligations and what your rights are. Number one in your lease, things that we want to look for is a provision that's called a going dark provision. Typically in a commercial lease, you have an obligation to be open, especially if you're in the retail space, especially if you're a restaurant. You have an obligation to be open and be open a certain number of hours. Now, I imagine most landlords are, from a technical standpoint, starting to relax a lot of those things. This is also a place where we're getting into a force majeure clause, because you may have an obligation to remain open, but Jefferson County just told an awful lot of businesses that they're not allowed to be open right now, which means you are no longer able to perform that particular obligation of your lease. Now, here's the thing that's important about that, though. Even if that's the case, you still technically have a legal obligation to pay rent. And so those are separate and apart from each other. Whether or not you were open and using the space is irrelevant to whether or not you were required to pay for your use of the space. Going dark provisions are they're actually really hard to get since 2008. So most leases are not going to have them in. We actually had some of these options that existed in leases where we were able to basically reach out to the landlord, say, hey, we're going to close our doors. This is what it's going to look like. And you were obligated to either continue paying rent, pay something extra as a result of it, or sometimes there was a discounted rent because you weren't there and say the lights weren't on, which meant you could go dark, right? You could darken your windows. Now, most of those don't exist, but some of us have been, by government mandate told that we have to go dark. So what does that look like? And how do we kind of solve those problems? And how do we deal with rent in this situation? Most of your force majeure clauses, these are probably the things you're starting to read about and hear about, but most of your force majeure clauses are actually going to, again, very much like the business insurance, be about your inability to do certain things as a result of whatever thing necessarily happened. And it may or may not include a pandemic. Now, there are actually some force majeure clauses that do actually include the word pandemic, which brings what's happening right now into the force majeure and allows us to kind of deal with it. But in many cases, right now, from a technical standpoint, despite the fact that there's a downturn in revenue, your ability to pay is not necessarily impacted, from a timing standpoint. And so there are a lot of things to deal with here. So the thing I will say at this moment is communicate. You have to talk to your landlord and deal with what those are. You need to understand what your lease says, understand what your obligations are, and then know what you're going to ask, and ask for something, whether it's a waiver of late fees or deferral of rent or whatever that looks like in your business because of your particular legal needs. Let's kind of see what's going on, but let's make sure that we communicate with our landlords. All right, now next is our employees, our team. These are the people that have been here with us, right? Some of them for a long time, some of them for a short time, but they're here, they're on our team, they're a part of what's going on, they're a part of helping us move things forward. So how can we take care of them? How can we make sure that they know that we are working to make sure that they're taken care of? Because our employees are terrified that we as small business owners who are talking to the government going, hey, we're gonna have to shut down. These are people who are afraid of their jobs. They're afraid of losing their jobs, not because they're gonna get fired, but they're afraid that it's just not gonna be there because they trust you and they know you. But what does that necessarily look like for us to solve those problems? So a couple of things that we're going to have to look at right now. One is the Emergency Leave Act and what that does to small businesses. Like I said on Gatehouse Live Friday, we're still waiting on some Department of Labor guidance on some particular things and exactly the way that things work. For the most part, there are exemptions for businesses under 25 employees and businesses under 50. In some instances, those exemptions may actually require some type of application process and we have to actually follow rules. Those are some of the things that we're still waiting on. But here's a couple of things if you are trying to make sure that your people are taken care of and you do want to actually pay your people, during this time, unless and until you don't have an option. Here are some of the things we have to deal with. One, on the payroll side, right now, payroll is still continuing. We're still going to have to pay our people the way that we're supposed to. Some of the talk has been in, reimbursement of payroll or potentially deductions of payroll. But right now, until we kind of know what's actually going on, we still need to expect to spend the same money that we have been spending. And then, so as a result of that, let's talk a little bit about the work from home policies, right? So telework policies, options for your people to make work for them right at home, to figure out how we can actually get our people to work from home. Perhaps we're in a business that hasn't traditionally done that, and trying to deal with what that looks like and what people have to do, help our staff understand what it feels like to work from home, be patient and guide them through this and let them understand that the things they're doing to help you drive your business forward is making sure that they still have a job to move forward, and encourage your people to make good decisions, not to get exposed to things, not to just try to cash in on particular things like that. Understand that the best thing we can do, our people can do, for their job is to help us move the business forward, to listen to the leaders, to help us move those things forward as we can. So next I want to talk about leave and sick policies before we get to what your options are if you can't afford it. Your leave policies and sick policies become really important in this new expansion of the FMLA. If you are paying your people because they've been, quarantined for whatever, or you're under the obligation to actually compensate your people because they are, because they are sick, and deal with that, and they go under this leave, and there's certain kind of rules about how you're supposed to pay them and what that looks like. If you are operating under that guideline, right? So you are either going to apply and exercise under your exemption, or you're going to do what the government says. Those are your two options. You can't do some of both. If you operate under it and you do allow your people to go under leave, and they do go on that leave, a couple of things. One, you cannot require them to use sick or other type of leave policies that already exist before they actually go into this expanded FMLA leave. They actually go straight into that, right? So this is on top of, sick leave and other types of leave that happens. There are limitations. It's not a full payment requirement. There's some impacts there, and we'll try to get some full kind of breakdowns of what these particular things look like. But for the sake of time today, the real thing we're looking at is the leave and sick policies. We can't basically say you have to take your sick time before you get your FMLA time. We can't say those things and make sure that they're there. So then, and I've left this to the end intentionally, in Alabama, we are an at-will state, which technically means as business owners, we can terminate people for any reason or no reason, as long as it's a business legitimate reason. Now, right now, what you can't do is terminate somebody because they've been diagnosed with the virus. You can't say, well, you can't work here anymore because you've been diagnosed with a virus. But from a technical standpoint, you can lay them off because you literally can't afford for them not to work. So there are some kind of options there. But the big thing that I will say is that we want to make sure in a situation like this that we're laying people off, that we're making sure that it is abundantly clear that they have been laid off, both for their own sake to understand that they haven't done anything wrong, and for some of the benefits that they may be able to receive, because unemployment has been relaxed as a result of this. So if you're laying people off, the wait period is starting to get waived, so they can go ahead and make sure that they're getting compensated. Yeah. So typically, when we have these conversations, we're looking for legitimate reasons for termination and documenting your termination of what's going on from a legal standpoint, because we don't want to be hit with an unemployment claim for an employee that we had to let go because they actually were not doing their job the way they were supposed to. But in this particular circumstance, we're kind of all in this together. So if we're having to lay our people off, we're laying our people off because we literally can't function if they're not doing their job, or because we literally can't afford to keep our staff full because we're not making the money that we were making 2 weeks ago, or whatever that looks like. So what does that particularly look like, and how can we help that team kind of move forward? There are a ton of places right now that are also hiring. So if you have to do this, let's go ahead and give them some kind of updates. There's some local, I know Publix is starting to hire. I'm sure there's a lot of work that can be found at grocery stores right now. Amazon is starting to hire work from home. There's a lot of options that we can provide to our staff. This is obviously a last minute measure, but we don't want to burn bridges, right? If this is a situation where we have to do what is necessary to survive, to protect our families, to protect as many people as we can, on the other side of this, our team, the ones who stuck there for us, we'd like to be able to get them back, right? So we want to make sure that we're kind of moving this forward to take care of them. Now, a little bit different is going to be your contractors, who are still part of your team, and we look at them in that way, and there's a lot of things that they have, but a lot of these impacts aren't necessarily happening because they weren't in all the team meetings. They weren't required to be in the office. There's a lot of things that change. So now with contractors, we're looking at a couple of other issues. Obligations for work and deliverables. If you're relying on them to complete things, you got to make sure it's being done. And what happens again, we're going to force majeure clauses, right? If they are able to perform and you were requiring that thing to happen, you've got to continue to communicate with them and make sure that they are still moving they're moving your projects forward under the contract. They've got to figure out how to work remotely and things like that, but you have to keep your business moving forward. So how do you talk to them and solve those questions from a contractor standpoint? And then a lot of contractor agreements have this payment when paid or payment if paid kind of obligations, which basically says that your contract is going to be paid when you're paid. How can you kind of have those conversations, especially if your customers are starting to create problems and not create problems, but they're being slow to pay, for whatever reason, and we're trying to solve those problems. So we want to make sure and have those conversations, understand what your contract says, understand what you can push on versus not push on. The last of these, before we get to questions, is your external relationships, right? What is our relationship with our customers? What is our relationship with our clients? How do we kind of do these things? How do we communicate with them about ways they can help us? How can we change our offerings and what's going on? So this is the way we're dealing with everyone, right? Talking to all of the people paying attention to us and looking at what's going on. So here are a few things that we, before we get to questions, that we want to consider. One, what is your obligation to perform? You have customers and clients, especially when you're in the service business. Again, you technically have an obligation to move forward. Has that business shut down? Has your obligation changed, right? You need to know what's going on. You also have a legal obligation to mitigate damages, right? If something happens, if you can't technically perform in the right way, under the way that it runs under the contract, try to come up with a solution, right? If it's supposed to be some type of physical meeting or something like that, can you make it a Zoom meeting or a video meeting of some other variety? Payments and contracts. This is a huge one. We've had to answer a bunch of questions and deal with a lot of things about this. There's a lot of things that are getting rescheduled right now. Performance is becoming difficult or different. A lot of things are being rescheduled last minute. So now, what are we dealing with when it comes to our customers? This is both a legal issue and a customer service issue, which is legally, have we performed the services to entitle us to the money that we're supposed to get? Customer service wise, if all of those services led to this one last thing that's supposed to happen, an event that was supposed to happen on Saturday or something like that, what does that mean? How do we solve that problem? Because it's been rescheduled. So basically, we're going to have to start over and do all of our work again, right? If you're running an event for someone, if you're managing an event, making decisions, rescheduling it by 4 months or 6 months or 8 months in a situation like this, we don't know if the vendors are going to be gone. We don't know if everyone's going to be available. You basically have to start over. And so that's a communication thing to make sure that we explain to our customers the value of what we have and what's going on and the cost of those next steps, and start to figure out, are there ways we can offer discounts because we're all in this together, but we also have to make sure that our business continues to move forward. And be creative, right? How can you solve problems for your clients and make sure you've earned your money and taken care of those things? Partner with your clients and solve problems, right? How can you provide value right now to make sure that you're meeting your obligations, that people understand what's going on? You know, we've shared a couple of examples on our Gatehouse Lives about different kind of solutions that we're seeing, right? But we're seeing, you know, gift cards. Can you buy gift cards for retail shops, and what's going on? Can we work with our customers to partner with us to continue paying even though we're not necessarily providing the service that we typically would? You know, because that ensures that we're still open at the end of the day. But if you do that, is there something else you can do? Can you replace what you're doing to help solve some of those problems, right? Can you create different offerings to provide value and look for a way to move your business forward? The key is at this point to reevaluate what it is you do to solve problems for your customers and figure out if there's a creative way to do it, whether it's online or it's in varying other different ways to do it. How can you actually do this, you know, to protect your customers? And as we roll into questions, the last thing that I'll say here is, in a situation like this, as business owners, as business leaders, what we're dealing with is, we're dealing with a lot of fear for ourselves, right? Is this business we've worked so hard to build still going to be here at the end of the day? How do we take care of our people and our customers and still meet the mission that we have? As business owners, this is an opportunity for us to solve some problems and provide value in a new and different way. And we want to make sure that we're taking care of our customers and our team in the best possible way to move forward, to make sure we're taking care of them. And right now, the biggest thing I can say is we've got to communicate across all of the pillars of the foundation, right? And make sure we're having those conversations regularly and rapidly. Talk to our team about what they can do to take a lot of the stuff that we've traditionally done day to day so that they can continue to work like their job depends on it, and they can continue to work for us to move our business forward while we're working to change potentially the direction that our business is taking, even if it is for a short period of time. And how can we solve those problems in working with our partners, our investors, our vendors, our service providers, our team, and our customers? Because ultimately we're all in this together, and your customers who've paid you want to figure out a way to help you, but they're also dealing with some of these issues themselves. And so how can we all work together to take care, and how can we share that common information across all people? So now I would like to go ahead and move to some of these questions for us to get started, and you guys can continue asking the Q&A questions, and Kim may come back in a minute if she's seen some others from somewhere else. But get it started. I've got a Bob Keener. Hey, Bob, as a child care center, we're being begged to reopen. When we decide to do that, what's my risk if an employee tests positive and a child gets infected? Oh, wow. This is actually a very interesting question, and one that we're certainly going to be dealing with in a lot of different places. So a couple of things that we need to be looking at, and this I would actually say is probably in both directions for you, which is both for the family and the child as well as for your employees. is we need to go ahead now and start putting together policies about how you're going to implement protecting and making sure that doesn't happen, right? Because you can't stop it from happening, but you can put everything in place to do everything in your power to stop it from happening. So again, you're trying to mitigate your risk and solve this problem. So for an employee, we want to do, maybe there's some kind of contact tracing that we're dealing with employees. Employees have to, we've been closed for this long, we need to make sure that they're, telling us that they haven't gotten themselves exposed, or they're not aware of any exposure that's happened in the last, whatever you determine from a business standpoint, 4 days, 14 days, whatever that happens to be, that they have not actually been infected in that way. And make sure before they come to work that happens. If they have been exposed, what are you requiring? Is it a 14-day quarantine where they're not there and they show no symptoms, or is it a negative test? And what are we dealing with? And I would say, make sure, especially on the small business side, make sure that we're making some decisions so we're not making it overly burdensome. I have heard some stories of employers who require a negative test, before you can return to work, but the particular location or the locale is not providing these tests because there's no more symptoms, so they won't give them that test. So make sure that your policy can actually be followed, and then make other implementations in what's going on if they've been exposed and they followed all of these things. Are they required to wear a mask, for the next, however long, so they can come back to work, but they actually have to provide certain levels of protection to move forward, and kind of what that looks like. So from a risk standpoint, the best thing you can do is mitigate. The other thing I will say on the other side is with your families, when they're actually coming back and we're starting to bring children, has the family been exposed? Because we have that same exact problem, right? So maybe we've got to put a new waiver in place, for these families that basically says that you've got to provide this information. You have to disclose this. Again, we're moving that liability off of you to the family, because you've allowed them to come in because they have informed you contractually that they have not been exposed and they're not a danger to your staff or your other children there. So I hope that answers your question. The next question is going to be regarding physical loss. This is about the insurance that we just talked about. The physical loss situation, and this is one I don't actually have a necessary answer to this from an insurance standpoint. We're actually reaching out to some of our contacts who are also agents, hoping that they'll give us not a different answer than they give you all, but maybe they'll be a little bit more candid, so we can provide a few things to solve some of those questions. But physical loss is, in all of the contracts that we've reviewed, that's exactly the situation that we've had, is this physical loss, and an ability to do that. Right now, what we're looking at from a legal standpoint is there a way to kind of make arguments, even, we're not necessarily going to court on this, but we're making arguments to the insurance company saying, no, your intention on this was from a physical loss. If you were unable to be open because of fire, earthquake, damage, whatever, even the civil authorities' responsibility, because we looked at that when, the city of Birmingham started closing a number of locations, or, especially the impact of restaurants, and what's going on is because we're losing money because we're complying with this particular, order, and we can't do it, but even technically under that, that's not the quantifiable definition under most insurance contracts for us to be dealing with. Is how can we deal with this? How can we make this argument to the insurance company, hopefully to get them to do the right thing without necessarily having to litigate the mess out of this? Hopefully that's not going to happen. We are going to continue pressing on our contacts as much as we can, and providing as much information as we can, and then continuing to kind of move down that path and see what we can do to make it work. But physical loss is a really dangerous thing. Like I said, continue talking to your agent. Those are the best things that you can do right now. Potentially talk to your lawyer, who can also talk to your agent, so they're getting press from all sides, because the insurance company ultimately, this is almost going to sound terrible, but the insurance company is going to do what looks good from a PR standpoint. And if they're getting pressure from a lot of small businesses, and they're getting arguments and legitimate arguments about one interpretation of this contract, they don't want to get sued 11 ways from Sunday. And so they're probably going to want to make a move, to actually solve some of those things for you, and get there. So I hope, again, that answers your question. Kim, I believe I don't see any questions on my end, but again, this is
I think
our first time.
let me check Facebook one more time.
Right. Yeah, I'm definitely not on Facebook. So
Yeah, no, I think that's it. So thank y'all. Remember, you can go to Gatehouse on Instagram. They have Gatehouse Law live at 1:30. And Josh, we have just a minute. Why don't you tell people, since you didn't, about the membership program that y'all have for your client, or option that you have?
oh, well, thank you. Yeah, one of the things that we do is we're a no surprise billing firm. And one of the things we've done to help small businesses before this, but it's actually been very beneficial for our clients who are in this situation because of what they've been able to receive, is we actually have a membership program that is a flat fee that you actually pay. And one of the primary things that's included is email and phone consultations with your attorney. And so a lot of our clients who are on this membership program were able to start asking questions really fast without a fear of the extra cost, because they already know what it is. It's a flat fee. And so we do have that program that's available. It is open right now. You can join the program and start doing that, as opposed to wondering what those ongoing, cost of just having conversations with lawyers are. We've got lawyers who are able to answer your questions. We work with small businesses. We understand what's going on, and we're all in our office, well, in our work from home offices, remotely, separately, socially distanced, are working on all of the research to get this moving forward. And our goal for small business owners, like hopefully this webinar was able to do for you guys, and what we're doing on Gatehouse Law, is looking from a comprehensive standpoint, right? We're talking to you as business owners. I'm a business owner. I've been running a business since 2008, making these decisions. I'm solving these problems for my employees, for my clients, with my vendors, and I'm having all of these same conversations that you guys are. But I look at it from a different lens, and I want to make sure that you get as much information as possible. And these membership programs are something that is absolutely available if you guys are looking for a cost-controlled way of asking all the questions that you have.
That's right. Well, thank you guys for joining us. I know there's lots of Zoom calls going on right now and different webinars that you're wanting to attend. So thank you. And be sure to follow Forge on Instagram. We will continue to do these, and that's really the best way to see what's going on. We have recorded this. It is on Facebook. It will be reposted on Facebook. So if you have a friend or another business owner who you think would benefit from hearing this, please feel free to share that. It's just Work at Forge on Facebook. And then we'll also follow up with an email with a recording of this if you wanted to share it that way as well. But thank y'all. Feel free to email us, info@workatforge, if there's any other topics that you would like to see addressed. We really want to do what we can to serve y'all during this time. So thank you, and y'all have a good Monday afternoon.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.